The mighty River Chenab had turned into a monster, roaring through villages and forests, swallowing everything in its path. Homes vanished in seconds, trees cracked under the pressure, and terrified animals fled for their lives. But one creature was not fast enough. A cheetah, the very symbol of speed and survival, had been caught in the flood's merciless grip. His golden coat, once gleaming under the sun, was now drenched and stained with mud. He clawed desperately at floating branches, trying to escape the swirling current, but each attempt dragged him deeper into danger. The jungle stood silent, helpless, as its fastest predator became prey to the unstoppable power of water. The question was no longer how fast he could run, but whether he could survive at all. Sometimes, a single phone call can decide between life and death. At the rescue headquarters, the air was already tense with reports of flood damage. Suddenly, the emergency line rang. A trembling voice of a local farmer broke through the static. "I saw it, a cheetah," he gasped. "The poor creature is trapped in the floodwater. Being carried into the deep water, it won't survive much longer." The room fell silent for a heartbeat. A wild cheetah, nature's fastest hunter, now helpless against the raging flood? It was unthinkable. The rescue chief slammed his hand on the desk. "Prepare the team, boats, ropes, tranquilizers. We don't have a second to lose." The race against the river had just begun. Every rescue begins with courage, but this one demanded even more. 5 rescuers gathered at the flood base, each pulling on heavy waterproof gear. Their boat was checked twice, ropes neatly coiled, life jackets tightened, and a medical kit carefully stocked. This wasn't an ordinary mission. It was a fight to save a life in the middle of raging waters. Yet, everyone knew the danger. A wild cheetah wasn't just fragile, it was a predator. If panicked, it could strike. The silence spoke louder than words, but their eyes burned with determination. The chief finally broke it. "Remember, this is about survival, for the cheetah, and for us. No mistakes." Engines roared to life. The rescue team was ready to face the flood's fury. The rescue boat cut into the roaring flood, its engine straining against the furious current. Wind howled like a beast, whipping rain across their faces. Waves crashed against the sides, threatening to overturn them with every surge. Broken branches, logs, and debris rushed past, forcing the rescuers to steer with razor-sharp focus. Suddenly, through the sheets of rain, the outline of a half-drowned village appeared. Houses buried in water, rooftops barely visible. Another rescue team worked desperately there, pulling stranded families onto boats. The sight was both heartbreaking and a warning. The Chenab's fury spared no one. Still, the mission was clear. Somewhere ahead, a wild cheetah fought for its life. And the rescuers could not turn back. Through the curtain of rain, one rescuer suddenly pointed ahead. He shouted. All eyes followed, and there it was. A lone cheetah, clinging desperately to a half-submerged tree. Its once mighty frame trembled with weakness, half its body submerged in the freezing floodwater. The animal's golden fur was matted, heavy with mud, and its eyes, usually sharp and fierce, now burned with exhaustion and silent pleading. The floodwater, surging around the tree, threatened to wash it away at any moment. For a few seconds, silence fell on the rescue boat. No one had ever seen a predator in such helplessness before. One rescuer whispered, almost to himself, "It's fighting to live, just like us." The mission had truly begun. The rescue team's hearts pounded as the boat reached closer to the half-submerged tree. The cheetah was exhausted, his body trembling, half drowned in the raging water. His breaths were shallow, his strength nearly gone. Only a faint glimmer in his eyes showed his desperate will to live. "We don't have much time," the team leader shouted over the roaring storm. Every second was slipping away like sand between their fingers. The boat shook violently under the force of the flood, but the rescuers held their ground. One medic clutched the emergency kit tightly, whispering, "Hold on, just a little longer." The cheetah's paws began to loosen, his grip fading fast. A heavy silence hung in the air. The real battle was about to begin. With trembling determination, the rescuers edged their boat closer to the struggling cheetah. Every move had to be precise. One mistake could send them all into the furious water. Two men reached out, gripping the animal's drenched body, while the others balanced the boat against the waves. "Easy, don't let go," the leader warned, his voice sharp with urgency. At last, with a final pull, they managed to drag the cheetah onto the boat. The creature collapsed heavily on the wooden floor, water dripping from his fragile frame. His body was weak, almost lifeless, yet his eyes opened slightly, half-lidded but aware. He could see everything around him. The rescuers exchanged worried glances. The hardest part wasn't over yet. His survival still hung by a thread. The boat rocked gently as rescuers began their return journey, carrying the fragile life they had just pulled from death's grip. The cheetah lay unconscious, his fur soaked and clinging tightly to his frail body. Water pooled beneath him, and each shallow breath seemed to fade in and out like a dying flame. One rescuer carefully pressed a cloth to his side, drying his body with slow strokes, while another checked his breathing, counting the seconds between each fragile inhale. "Stay with us," he whispered, hope trembling in his voice. They draped blankets over him, shielding him from the cold wind, doing everything possible to keep him calm. The river stretched endlessly, but their mission was clear: bring him back alive. As the boat touched the shore, the rescue team wasted no time. They carefully lifted the unconscious cheetah onto a stretcher, his body still damp and weak, his chest rising only faintly with each fragile breath. With urgent steps, they rushed him into a waiting vehicle and sped toward the wildlife hospital. Inside, doctors and nurses were already prepared. The cheetah was placed gently onto the treatment table, surrounded by bright lights and focused faces. Fluids were quickly inserted to fight dehydration, while an oxygen mask was strapped over his muzzle to help his failing lungs. Heat pads and warm blankets were wrapped around his body, slowly restoring his lost warmth. Every second mattered. Every action carried the weight of his survival. Rescues. The room was silent except for the beeping monitors, echoing the battle between life and death. Hours passed under the watchful eyes of the doctors and rescuers. Suddenly, the cheetah's body twitched. His eyes flickered open, and with a sudden burst of energy, he let out a fierce roar that shook the room. For a moment, the team froze. Was he angry, frightened, or in pain? But then something extraordinary happened. The wild fire in his gaze softened. His breathing steadied, and his eyes glimmered with something far deeper than rage: gratitude. That silent moment of connection left every rescuer speechless. They knew they had earned the trust of a creature who belonged only to the wild. The cheetah would remain under careful observation until the flood danger was over. Then, strong and free again, he would return to the jungle where he truly belonged. Stories like this remind us of the unbreakable bond between humans and nature. Don't forget to subscribe